Section 6 is dedicated to wrapping up our important FMC definitions, so let's not waste any time and let's jump right in. Marine Terminal Operator, MTO. We saw this previously as a key player in the ocean transportation ecosystem. The FMC has a specific definition, which is a person engaged in the U.S. in the business of providing wharfage, dock, warehouse, or other terminal facilities in connection with a common carrier. The terminal is the location on the port where all of these maritime activities take place. Loading ships, offloading ships, managing containers, moving chassis around, perhaps some short-term warehousing services. These are all provided by MTOs. The MTOs are looked after by the FMC. NVOCC, second bullet here. We've talked about this a bunch of times. We'll see it some more. Let's review. An NVOCC is a common carrier that does not operate the vessels by which the ocean transportation is provided. It's a company to contract for services with actual steamship lines, with actual vessel operating common carriers, to turn around and resell that space to importers in the United States. Somewhat analogous to a wholesaler, somewhat analogous to that travel agent for cargo that we mentioned a couple of times now. The NVOCC, it's the N part, non-vessel operating common carrier. They can act like a steamship line. They don't have to have ships. They contract with the steamship lines to buy and sell space on those ships. Continuing on with the theme of the NVOCC, we now have what's referred to as the non-vessel operating common carrier rate arrangement, referred to as an NRA. And it's not that NRA, not the National Rifle Association. This is specific to maritime transport. It's a contract, specifically a written and binding arrangement between an NRA shipper, a BCO, and an eligible NVOCC to provide specific transportation service for a stated cargo quantity from origin to destination on or after receipt of the cargo by the carrier or its agent. This is a contract between a beneficial cargo owner and an NVOCC. Its specific name is an NRA, Negotiated Rate Arrangement. We actually have examples of contracts in upcoming sections. We'll have a look at them at that time. For now, let's understand that an importer, a BCO, a beneficial cargo owner, can negotiate for space on ships directly with the carrier, the vessel operating common carrier, or with an NVOCC, that non-vessel operating common carrier. We will make distinctions between the two in quite a bit of detail. This is just a definition. As a trade tip, to state it in other words, an NRA, it's an ocean contract between a beneficial cargo owner and an NVOCC. Basically, what we just got through saying. Conversely, a non-vessel operating common carrier service arrangement, an NSA, is a written service contract between an NVOCC and shipper or shippers association. Really what we're talking about here, NRAs, NSAs, these are contracts between NVOs and BCOs. You'll forgive the alphabet soup here, but it really can't be avoided. Agreements, arrangements, better said, between NVOCCs, shippers, and or shippers associations. Second bullet, ocean common carrier. It's that vessel operating common carrier, the steamship line, the actual asset of the ship. The company that controls that asset is the VOCC, the ocean common carrier. Ocean freight forwarder and ocean transportation intermediary, the last two bullets on this slide. They're really quite important because we've mentioned them a couple of times, but we need to define them a little bit further. First, the ocean freight forwarder is a person that dispatches shipments from the U.S. via a common carrier and books or otherwise arranges space for those shipments on behalf of shippers. There's a big difference between an ocean freight forwarder and an NVOCC. The forwarder provides services, essentially, booking on ships on behalf of a shipper with the common carrier, the actual operator of the asset, the ship itself. arranging for space on ships, but not the negotiation of rates and the buying and selling of space on ships. That's different. That's the primary difference between an ocean freight forwarder and an NVOCC. Wrapping up this slide, an OTI, which is the general terminology that we've been using, can be either an ocean freight forwarder that simply provides coordination services, or that NVOCC that can buy or sell space with the common carriers. There's a difference between an ocean forwarder, service provider, and an NVOCC, a licensed entity that can buy and sell space on ships. In general, they're both referred to as an OTI. An OTI is an ocean forwarder or an NVOCC. A service contract. A service contract is different from an NRA and or an NSA in that it is a written contract other than a bill of lading or receipt between one or more shippers on the one hand and an individual vessel operating common carrier, or an agreement between or among ocean common carriers on the other, in which, and we'll get to this in just a second, but let's stop here and look at the service contract. It's between shippers and a vessel operating common carrier, the actual steamship line. NRA and NSA are specific to NVOCC agreements. A service contract is related to vessel operating common carriers, in which what happens? Now we can move on. For a sub-bullet, the shipper or shippers commit to providing a certain volume or portion of cargo over a fixed time period, and the ocean common carrier or the agreement commits to a certain rate or rate schedule and a defined service level, space, transit time, etc. What do these two sub-bullet points mean? It's the terms of the service contract between the vessel operating common carrier, the ship operator, the steamship line, and a single or multiple shippers, BCOs, at the end of the day. What do? Summarizing our sub-bullet points, the shippers agree to provide a certain volume of cargo, 10,000 containers a year. That's what we mean by a certain volume of cargo. And then the ocean common carrier, the VOCC, turns around and says, okay, in exchange for those 10,000 containers, this is the ocean rate, and this is the schedule and level of service that we're going to provide. It's a contract between steamship lines and BCOs, but different from an NRA and an NSA, which are specific to NVOCCs and beneficial cargo owners. To define what a shipper is, a shipper can be a cargo owner, a beneficial cargo owner. Second, the person for whose account the ocean transportation of cargo is provided. Third, the person to whom delivery is made. It might be a shippers association, as we defined previously, or an NVOCC that accepts responsibility for payment of all charges. An NVOCC, especially an NVOCC that provides less than container load consolidation services, can serve as the shipper. The shipper is the one who gets the bill from the steamship line. When the NVOCC acts in that capacity, it becomes responsible for payment of all charges. For our purposes, in not so technical terms, the shipper is going to be the vendor overseas, the international supplier. But in the end, we're most interested in the BCO, the beneficial cargo owner. But there are some slight differences in semantics there we have to point out. Wrapping things up in this section, we talked about a shippers association as a key player in the ecosystem. Here's the definition again. A group of shippers that consolidates or distributes freight on a non-profit basis for the members of the group to obtain a carload, truckload, or other volume rates or service contracts. It's a bunch of shippers, a bunch of BCOs, in our examples, that get together, combine their cargo, and instead of having 1,000 containers apiece, they have 10 BCOs that now have 10,000 containers. They create a non-profit to manage that cargo. They go to the steamship line or an NVO, negotiate rates on those volumes, and all the members, even though each one only had 1,000 containers to contribute to the association, they benefit from the overall volume discount of the 10,000 containers. 10 shippers in a shippers association, each one contributing 1,000 containers to the overall volume. Shippers associations are quite common in both the import and export world. A tariff, not to be confused with customs tariffs, customs duties. In this context, a tariff is a publication containing the actual rates, charges, classifications, rules, regulations, and practices of a common carrier or a conference of common carriers. Tariffs in this instance are all about the charges associated with the international movement of goods by maritime transport. These are the same tariffs that have to be published through tariff publishers as mandated by the Federal Maritime Commission. Okay, that's it for this section. We talked about the FMC. We certainly talked a lot about the FMC definitions. Hopefully, a clearer understanding of those definitions are going to help us when we come back for the next section, in which we'll dig deeper into key ocean freight participants, these members of the ecosystem, starting with steamship lines, the carriers.